Yes, people, how are you all doing? Hope everyone is fit and well. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about transgender inmates. And all of these ones that I'm going to be talking about are situated up in Scotland. Now, there's actually three, but this was brought to my attention by one of my Scottish subscribers. So the first one is Sophie Eastwood, Isla Bryson, and Tiffany Scott. Now, the reason why this is in the headlines lately is because Sophie Eastwood has been sent back to a man's prison. He or she, I'm going to refer to him as he. Obviously, he's been sent back to a man's prison. So the prison service obviously identifies him as a man. But it is quite confusing because when I'm doing a bit of research into this, some of the newspaper articles are referring to him as her, and some of them are referring to him as him, which, as I've just described there, can be quite confusing. And I can imagine it's confusing for the prison system, especially the inmates. So I'll start talking about Sophie Eastwood to start with. I've just got my computer here just to get a few facts up, just so I don't miss anything out. Because like I've mentioned, I'm talking about three different inmates here. So I've got all the information up in front of us on this computer. And Sophie Eastwood, who was formerly or initially named Daniel Eastwood at birth, was doing a relatively short sentence to begin with for driving offences. And he had a few weeks left on his sentence when he went on to kill his padmate. Now, his padmate, 2 seconds, where was it at? So the padmate was Paul Algie, who was 22 when this happened in 2004. So Eastwood has been in prison ever since then. So, which is, I think 2 seconds, it got, for the murder, he got a minimum of 15 years. And that was in 2019, it says here, 2 cents. Has been living as a woman in jail for 4 years and completed her 15-year minimum term in 2019. So he's now been in prison for 19 years. But he was given the 15-year minimum term for killing his padmate when he only had a few weeks left on his sentence. But the more I've been looking into this and the information I got from my Scottish subscriber, Sophie, or Daniel, will refer to as Sophie because I think that's what he identifies as now. So he was serving that short sentence and he had a few weeks left on his sentence, but these inmates that I'm talking about wanted to be known throughout the system. They wanted to be known as dangerous, and they wanted to have this attention, and they wanted to be known as dangerous inmates in Scotland. So it says that he began transitioning into a woman, which would ultimately get him sent to a women's prison. And that's actually what happened. So, where are we at here? Sorry. Eastwood, who has lived as a woman in Her Majesty's prisons for the past 4 years, has been described as attention-seeking and manipulative by sources inside the jail. The murderer has now told chiefs at Polmont Prison in Brighton's, Scotland, that she identifies as a tot and should be allowed to wear diapers and have her meals pureed like baby food. So not only did he want to identify as a woman, he now wants to identify as an infant who wears nappies and demands baby food in prison. Now, this is mind-boggling, especially for someone who's been in prison, but I can't understand how the prisons could actually bow down to these sort of demands. And I think it goes on to say that he actually wears nappies in the prison. So what sort of establishment is actually going along with this and providing and bowing down to these type of demands where they're going to be identified as an infant. If somebody wants to be identified as an infant, wants to walk around with a nappy on, eat baby food, and tell everyone he's a woman and then he's a baby, to me, that screams out serious mental health issues. And if this is for real, then that person should be in a mental institute. Shouldn't be walking around prisons like this, identifying as a woman and getting sent down to 2 seconds. Which prison was it at? I think it was Cortonville. So 2 seconds, where are we at? So when she identified as a woman, see, as you'll notice, I'm getting confused myself because I keep saying she and he, but in the different articles that I've been reading up on, they're referring to, as I just mentioned, as a she, then a he. Then when I'm reading these different articles, I'm saying she, then he. So excuse the mishaps, but it's a bit confusing. And so it says here, staff were concerned about the violence used. They branded Eastwood Hannibal Lecter Jr. Eastwood was jailed for life in order to serve a minimum term of 15 years at the High Court in Glasgow and has now served 19 years. The killer said she realised at a psychologist session in 2016 that she was not a gay man but identified as a woman. She takes a drug that blocks the production of the male hormone testosterone. She has been held in women-only units since 2018 at HMP Edinburgh, Polmont, and a short spell at Cortonville. She claims to be remorseful, saying I was 18. To say I had unresolved issues would be a massive understatement. So since 2018, he was being held in women's units, and he's now, because he's classified as dangerous or a danger to women, they've sent him back to the men's prison. Now I can understand how confusing this must have been and how hard and tricky for the Scottish prison system when they've initially bowed down to the demands and then went along with the identity and identified him as a woman and sent him to the women's prisons. But to me, sending someone like this to the women's prisons isn't fair on the women. What happens if a lot of these women's prisons are double cells? But I think that they would have made the decision not to put them in double cells because of the confusion with it all. But I do also think that it's unfair to the women in the women's prisons to be having to share their facilities with someone who still has the man bits. And that's the way I'll refer to it as, because obviously YouTube, with the censors and everything, can be quite complicated when you're talking about issues like this. So Sophie, who identifies as a woman but still has his man bits, and in prison everyone has to share showers. There's not like single cubicles. You've got to go in and share showers. So how could this inmate go and share the showers with the females when he still has his bits? It would be very confusing for the women in the prison. And when it goes on to say that he's a danger to the women, I can only imagine what type of danger he could pose to the women. Obviously, with him being born a man, he's going to have men a lot stronger than women. So again, putting him inside of a prison with the women can be, or it would have been, a very tricky situation, because they're putting people at risk, where they're putting the prisoners at risk. And again, that's obviously why, after all these years, he's been transferred back up to HMP Shotts, which is a high security male prison, which is normally reserved for, well, murderers. So if he is a murderer, she murdered our cellmate. But even after spending all those years in prison, 19 years, since 2004, you would think that by now you'd be down the categories. I know up in Scotland there isn't A, B, C and D, it's all high, medium and low. But you would think after 19 years, Sophie would have been in a low security prison. Or you would think that he would be released after that amount of time in prison. Because when you finish your minimum term, you could be eligible for parole. But obviously, as it says here, and it states that Sophie, I wonder if they're still getting named Sophie when he's back in the male prison, because that's going to be confusing again. Like I mentioned, it was confusing for the women prisoners. It's now going to be confusing for the male prisoners, bringing someone back from a female establishment. When you have a look at the pictures, he's now got long hair, and he does look very effeminate, and he looks like a woman. But this person is going to be in HMP Shotts, trying to identify as an infant, demanding baby food and wearing nappies. So I can only imagine what the other inmates are going to be thinking up there, because HMP Shotts will be full of notorious, hardened prisoners. Because like I've mentioned, the majority of people up in them type of prisons are in for murder. But I would put me money on it, or put me life on it, that Sophie will probably be in the VP part of the prison, which is, if anyone doesn't know, it stands for vulnerable prisoner. And that's where they put people who are at risk of attack. Police informers, snitches, paedophiles, rapists. This is where they put all these type of people on the VP wings. So I can imagine that Sophie is actually living on the VP wings amongst these other inmates, because, like I've mentioned, you'd probably be very vulnerable to attack from the other inmates for trying to identify as an inmate and walking around with a nappy on. I can just imagine what the lads would say if that type of person come walking onto a normal location landing, wearing a nappy with a dummy in his mouth. It wouldn't last 2 minutes, and that is because of the way that he would have been conducting himself. If you've seen someone coming onto a wing like that when you're in a man's prison, you would think it was a joke. You would think, who's this coming onto the wing? Someone pulling a prank. But again, you wouldn't be living on a normal location wing. You'd be living in amongst them type of inmates, the ones that are in for S offences. So the other one I was going to be talking about is, who come up on the same page when I was doing a bit of research, is another inmate called Isla Bryson. So Bryson was assigned male at birth in 1991 and named Adam Binney Bryson. In July 2016, while presenting as male, Bryson married a woman with the surname Graham. So Bryson, while still presenting as male, committed rape against 2 women, one in September 2016 and one in June 2019. The first victim testified in Bryson's trial that she knew Bryson from a dating website, Badoo, where Bryson went under the name Adam Graham. The second victim testified in Bryson's trial that she knew Bryson from a social media app, Bigo, where Bryson went under the name DJ Blade. Bryson appeared in court in July 2019 under the name Adam Graham and was charged that year. Bryson began the process of gender transition into a gender woman in 2020 and assumed the name of Isla Annie Bryson in court that year. In May 2021, Bryson's legal name was changed on the birth certificate to Annie Bryson, but the legal gender was not changed and remained male. In 2023 trial, Bryson spoke of knowing of being transgender since the age of 4, then later at age 29 chose to undergo gender transition. Bryson's mother said in 2023, which is obviously this year, that Bryson never expressed any wish to me of wanting to be a girl, dressed in any other way, or ever asked to be called by any other name than Adam grown up. Bryson's estranged wife said in 2023 that there was no indication during their relationship that Bryson wanted to become a woman, and further accused Bryson of stabbing her and trying to rape her. Bryson's estranged wife also said in 2023 that she had been trying to end the marriage with Bryson for 7 years, but was unable to locate Bryson. As of February 2023, Bryson was undergoing hormonal treatment and had yet to undergo gender-affirming surgery. So as it clearly states there when it's talking about Bryson, he obviously has never shown these tendencies until he knew he was coming to prison or going to prison. So what does that lead to the interpretation? To me, it screams out that he's known he's going to prison and going to prison for that type of offence, and he's now wanting to go to a women's prison, probably trying to think that he would have an easier time rather than going to a male prison where he will become under attack because of the offence that he's in for. But again, putting someone like this who's trying to re-agenda himself as a woman and trying to get put into a lady or a woman's prison when in fact he's a man and he's in for raping women, it's a very, very dangerous thing to do. And I'll just go on to see what's happening here. So on the 26th of January 2023, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, commented on the case at First Minister's questions after the issue was raised by Conservative leader Douglas Ross. Sturgeon confirmed that Bryson would not be allowed to serve her sentence at Cornton Vale. So even in here they're referring to him as her, but obviously that's because he's legally changed his name, so he's now known as a female. There is no automatic right for a trans woman convicted of a crime to serve their sentence in a female prison, even if they have a gender recognition certificate. Every case is subject to rigorous individual risk assessment, and the safety of other prisoners is paramount. She also confirmed the Gender Recognition Reform Bill had no bearing on the Bryson case. Bryson was moved to a men's wing of HMP Edinburgh later the same day. It was later reported that Sturgeon had personally intervened in the case to have Bryson moved from Cornton Vale. Also, sorry, I've jumped ahead a little bit here. So he's obviously already in the woman's prison, and Nicola Sturgeon's intervened to get him moved back out of Cornton Vale. So at the 2nd of February session of First Minister's questions, Sturgeon stated her opinion that Bryson is almost certainly faking her transgender status. She was speaking in response to a question from Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, who read a statement to Parliament from one of Bryson's victims, who suggested she was faking the status as an easy way out. And it's exactly like what I've just said there. He's never mentioned it to his mother growing up. He's never wanted to be known as a girl. He's never mentioned it to any of his wives. But now he's in prison for a serious sexual offence. He wants to go to a women's prison. Now I wonder why. Or he did go to the women's prison. So what does that tell you? Why does he want to go in amongst the women? Following this decision to move Bryson to a men's prison, speculation arose concerning a potential blanket rule on accommodating transgender prisoners after Sturgeon agreed with comments made by Brindley during an appearance on the 27th of January. Vic Valentine, manager of the campaign group Scottish Trans, expressed fears that introducing such a rule could put some trans women at significant risk were they too be sent to a men's prison, but agreed a sex offender who poses a significant risk to women should not be housed with women on the female estate, and rightly so. Following the Bryson case and that of Tiffany Scott, a transgender woman convicted of, that's the one I'm going to be talking about next on that. On the 9th of February, the review concluded and it was announced that transgender people sent to prison in Scotland would initially be housed according to their sex at birth, after which an assessment would be carried out to determine whether it would be suitable to accommodate them in a men or women's facility. On the Bryson case, the report said that the Scottish Prison Services procedures had been followed, but that the SPS had received conflicting and limiting information about Bryson beyond the immediate convictions and recommended a shared justice process for the future admission of transgender people to prison. The report also said that Bryson did not have any contact with the other prisoners during her time at Cornton Vale and therefore did not pose a risk to them. On the 27th of February 2023, regulations in England and Wales came into force banning transgender women with their male genitalia intact or those who are sex offenders from being sent to women's prisons. On the 3rd of July 2023, Sky News reported that Bryson had written to the Sunday Mail to say that prison was full of transphobic people after a man was charged in relation to threatening behaviour against her. Police Scotland confirmed they had attended the prison on the 8th of July following reports of threatening behaviour and that a 24-year-old man has been charged over the incident. But it's like what I've just mentioned there when it's saying that transgenders have been banned from prison if they've still got their male bits, male genitalia intact, which is only right. And this is open to discussion in the comments if people want to mention it, because in my opinion, I don't think it's right either. Someone who's got man bits, like I mentioned earlier on in the video, getting sent to a woman's prison, which is rightly so, because that's going to leave the women feeling vulnerable, which isn't fair on the women at all. But moving on from that one, going to talk about the next one, which I mentioned. If any of you seen my last video when I'm talking about the IPP and the OLR sentence, I mentioned it in there when I said I was going to do a video on a transgender inmate who's actually, or an inmate who's serving this sentence. Now up in Scotland, I think it's referred to, it's a lifetime restriction order. But when you have a look up, it stands for Order for Lifelong Restrictions. And the term is OLR. But I think a lot of the Scottish subscribers and the Scottish inmates that have been to prison actually think it's LRO, Lifetime Restriction Order, when it's actually OLR. But just clearing that bit up there. But this next one is Tiffany Scott. And Tiffany Scott is serving the OLR. So Tiffany Scott was originally jailed as a juvenile, but after a series of violent and disturbing offences behind bars led to this OLR sentence. So the OLR was applied when she was sentenced in 2013 for stalking a 13-year-old girl by sending letters from prison. So obviously the prison has intercepted these letters, and this is what he has getting this lifetime restriction order for, which is the OLR sentence. If you have a look at my previous video, like I've just said, it'll describe it more. And it's the same as a life sentence. It's 99 years. And you get a recommendation. So I think the recommendation in this case was just a couple of years. So within 2 years you could be released if you don't pose a risk. But obviously Scott, I'll refer to him as Scott. It's Tiffany Scott, but I'll refer to him as Scott. Has obviously posed a risk still from behind bars, so potentially could be kept in prison for the rest of his life, or until the parole board see fit that he's ready for release. But even on release, he'll be on lifetime licence. But so a decision by the Scottish Prison Service to move Scott from HMP Shotts near Glasgow to a women's jail resulted in a furious public response, ultimately leading Sturgeon to backtrack on the treatment of trans prisoners. The First Minister had already been under huge pressure over the decision to house double rapist Isla Bryson, who I've just been talking about, in women's prison Cornton Vale. So Bryson had changed gender to female after being accused of 2 rapes. Sorry, I've just talked about that. A decision was made to send... Yeah, that's what I've just talked about, never mind. Within 2 days, the record had learned that Scott was earmarked for a move to a women's prison. The fallout from that quickly led to the Scottish Government to announce that no prisoners. So obviously, Tiffany Scott wasn't sent to the women's prison. But again, like I mentioned, Tiffany Scott was obviously trying the same thing as Isla Bryson and Sophie Eastwood. And rightly so, the move was blocked and he wasn't sent to the women's prison. But like it says there, he's been serving the OLR sentence and he's been kept in prison for all those years. Which, to be kept in that long on a short tariff, obviously tells you that he's a danger, especially if he's been trying to groom kids from inside the prison as well, whilst he's still serving sentences. And the difference with this inmate, this Tiffany Scott, he's wanting to be known as one of Scotland's most dangerous inmates. And this is probably why it's gone on to be kept in prison for this amount of time, for going on like this. And I think by reading up on the different articles that I've read up on, he is a massive pain for the staff as well, because any little thing he's putting in complaints about staff, saying that he's been subject to what you would call homophobic behaviour, and he's putting in complaints constantly, which is going to be a massive pain for the Scottish prison system, because cases like this, if they're not dealt with properly, then they can become scrutinised, and if they're not dealt with properly, there will be backlash from it, because it's high profile like this, and because it involves someone who's trying to, or is conforming as a woman, and in a man's prison. It's a very delicate situation for the Scottish prison system, because anything they say, if they say the slightest thing wrong, it'll be wrote down, and they'll be putting more complaints in, and there'll be legal proceedings going on. So I can just imagine how tricky it is for the Scottish prison, well, not even just the Scottish prison system, because it's meant on to say England and Wales, so it'll be throughout the UK. People like this are trying to identify as women when in fact they are clearly men, but because of all the legal situations and all of the politically correct things that are going on at the minute, if someone like this tries to identify as a woman, then they're within their rights to do so, and it's just going to make a mockery of the prison system. And that is just my own personal opinion on it, when people are trying to do this. But again, like I've mentioned, a lot of them will be people that are on the VP wings. I did read once, quite a while back, the likes of Ian Huntley was trying to do something similar so he could get sent to a woman's prison. And a lot of them will be doing it because of the offences that they're in for. They'll be thinking if they try and identify as a woman and get sent to a woman's prison, they're going to have an easier time. But I bet you any money, the women don't welcome them in like they think they're going to be, because the women will feel, like I've mentioned earlier on in the video, they'll be feeling quite volatile, or quite vulnerable, they're quite vulnerable in a volatile situation, which rightly so. But I just thought I would bring that to the attention, because I was asked to do this by one of my Scottish subscribers. And when I looked into the cases, like I say, they are interesting cases for people to hear about, because it's not very often you hear about this. So when I did read up into the two of them, obviously the other one popped up, and there's 3 inmates up in Scotland that are quite high profile now, and they've rightly so been sent back to the men's prison to serve the time. But I think I'll leave that one there for now, people. Hopefully you did enjoy that. But remember, if you are enjoying the content, remember to like, comment and subscribe. And if you do want to help support the channel, go down into the description box, click on the link for my Patreon channel, which gives you access to my Discord group, where you get exclusive access to early videos and general chat and different other support networks. But I'll leave that one there for now, people. Take care, everyone.